This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, and Bloomberg Originals.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. Yes, indeed, you are across Bloomberg platforms. I'm Carol Massar along with Tim Stenivek. And yeah, it's a new month of trading.
And the S&P 500 is surging up 1.5%. NASDAQ Composite up 2.2%. Got a big week. We got some economic data today. We're going to get a jobs report on Friday. I mean, get ready, Carol.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new month of trading. And it does seem like risk trade is on. That's despite peace talks, yes, no, TBD?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll find out, right?
I feel like we've been here before, that's for sure.
Jeff Mason will tell us in just a minute where we are exactly.
We're also going to ask him about a new attorney general. It seems like we're headed that way. We're also going to talk about good job, Mr. President. Maybe not so much. There's been a lot of polls out about how the public feels about the job he's doing, including this war with Iran. And then we're going to get to early access to the president's tweets. It seems like that's also happening.
Yeah, Jeff Mason's going to be joining us in just a minute. He's here in New York City, not in Washington, D.C., so we're looking forward to that.
He's listening. I hope you were taking notes because there's a lot there's a lot coming your way. Also joining us on set is a voice we really, really love as well, Torsten Slok. He's Chief Economist Partner over at Apollo Global Management. He's going to talk about the Fed. He's going to talk about the trade. He's going to talk about the role of AI in kind of breaking that traditional iconic 60-40 portfolio.
Yeah, looking forward to him joining us in just a minute. Just a reminder, too, be part of daily discussions. You can check out Bloomberg.com/AskRadio to ask questions of us and any of our guests who join us. Submit questions for guests at Bloomberg.com/AskRadio. It's exclusive to Bloomberg subscribers and terminal subscribers, too.
Well, the president must know that Jeff's on set with us because we're going to head to the Oval Office. President Trump taking some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, everybody.
ID at the ballot box.
This was just announced.
Yeah.
I heard about it. Yeah. Well, I wish they'd have an ID to access the voting booth. You know, they don't want to access the voting booth with any identification. We want voter ID and we want proof of citizenship. Well, he also had a thing where you had to have 2 different IDs to shovel snow during the winter, right? So that's a very friendly question. I like her. Who are you with?
One American News, sir.
Very good. All right. Good question. Very good. A good group, too.
Almost 20 GOP senators who have pledged to stay in D.C. to pass the Save America Act. So what's your message to the rest of the senators who are still on their summer recess?
I think there's nothing more important than the Save America Act. I think they should stay. They do what they want, but I think they should stay.
Mr. President,
I think it's so important to get it passed. Yeah.
Mr. President, where are the Iran talks, and what are your requirements
Well, you'll find
right
out
now?
today or tomorrow. I mean, they're going to go quickly, one way or the other. It's not very complex. We're talking about the Strait, the opening of the Strait, having it open literally by tomorrow, completely open. And that's phase 1. And phase 2 is we then will talk about the nuclear capacity, the nuclear, as we've been mentioned. Basically, it's, I think, the denuclearization of Iran has to happen. And that'll be the second phase. But the first phase is the opening of the Straits. The second phase will be the denuclearization, and that'll take a little while. But we're very strong on it. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and I've never changed in that. Yeah, please, in the back.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said that if Democrats get back into power, what is happening in Spain awaits America. What should voters in other countries with elections coming up soon take away from what's going on in Spain?
You have to be very careful with the whole socialist thing. I think in many cases it's much more than socialist. They skipped socialism. They went directly to communism. But when I saw what happened in Spain, I said, we had a version of that. You could say much worse. We allowed 25 million people under Joe Biden, the Democrats. We had open borders, and countries all over the world, almost all of them, sent people that they don't want into our country. And we've gotten a lot of them out, and we're getting more, including murders. And I always said 11,888. That was the number of murders. Many of them committed more than one murder. And we're going to be just like that if you put these lunatics in that I see running for office. We had an open border a year and a half ago. We had the worst border in the history of our country. Now we have the best border. We haven't had one person come in, and this is done by the Democrats, not by left-leaning people. They do charts, and they have, in 15 months, not one person has come in through our southern border illegally. Now, that's pretty amazing. I'd say maybe 10, maybe 15. They say none. And believe me, if they did, they'd love to report it. But you could go outside in those vast plazas where hundreds of thousands of people gathered when they stormed our country, just like they did, in my opinion, worse, just like they did to Spain. They stormed our country. And those borders are those big plazas that were built. They put concrete down. And now you look at them, and there's grass growing in the cracks. Nobody comes up because they know they're not going to get through. And if they do get through, they're going to be taken out, brought back to their country. So we've done a fantastic job. You know, somebody said you did it too fast. I did it in 30 days, my first 30 days. Biden couldn't do it. He couldn't get it done. He tried at the end. He tried to do something because it was so overwhelming. It was so bad politically. But we did it in 30 days. Somebody said you should have taken a year and a half or 2 years completed because everyone forgets. Even my speechwriters, they say, sir, nobody wants to hear about the border anymore. You've done it. It's an incredible job you've done, but nobody wants to hear about it. And I should have taken a couple of years to do it because, and it actually was, the public has about a 2-year, people do, they have a 2-year memory for certain things. They have a 2-week memory. I may have gotten elected, certainly partially on the border, and because we did such a great job, it was a long time ago. I did it twice. I did it in 2016 when it was bad, but I did it this last time when it was really bad. It was, Steve, I would say many, many times worse than it was in 2016. 2016 was bad, but what we just had a year and a half ago, that was the worst border maybe in world history. There's not a third world country that would have allowed that to happen, where people coming in from prisons and people coming in from mental institutions and people forced in by government, because these are the people that those governments, those countries, I know them all, they didn't want. And they walked into a country totally unvetted, totally unchecked. Not anymore. Nobody comes in. Except if they come in legally. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday you were...
Who are you with, please?
I'm with the Washington Examiner, sir.
Good. They're doing good. They've been very nice to me.
You were asked yesterday whether Representative Max Miller should resign from Congress of the allegations, and you said that you'd have a look at it.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? And also, do you think...
Well, it's a very sad thing. I know Max. He's a good person. I mean, I always thought he was a very good person. And I'm going to let the families figure that out. You know, those families... I know they're working on it. It's a very sad thing, especially when you know somebody so well, to be going through that. But it's accusations, and I'm going to let them figure that out. Yeah, please.
President, did you sign off on Todd Blanche rescinding the Anti-Weaponization Fund? And also, there are Democrats right now who say there's essentially 2 tax codes. There's a Trump family tax code and a normal people tax code. Why do you think that your family deserves some level of special exemption when it comes to the auditing of taxes?
Well, I'll go into that. First of all, I had a 10-year case that was settled until I announced I was running for office. It was a settled deal like I've been doing all my life. I've been audited every year for my entire life, which I have a lot of wealthy friends who were never audited. To this day, they were never audited. I was audited. And my deal was settled. In writing, it was settled, subject to final approval. Then I announced I was running for president, and all they did was haunt me with it. They ended the settlement, and they went after me illegally. And they did a lot of bad things to me like they did to other people. And I was treated very unfairly by the IRS. It was weaponized against me. Think of it. I had a case this is a 10-year-old case, and it was settled. It was done. The case was over. I announced I'm running for president, and they terminated the settlement in Washington, and they went after me. And what they did here was frankly, if you talk about reparations or if you talk about payment, what they did to me, I had a very good case against them. So this was a case that was settled, that when I decided to run for president, right at the beginning, this is a long time, it's been going on for a long time, they terminated the settlement, which is something that never happened before. We have letters from the biggest law firms in Washington saying that this case is nonsense, just like the Russia was nonsense. They weaponized government. And so that's that, and most people understand that. On the fund, these were people that were treated unbelievable. 22 suicides, more than that, I think. Look at Ashley. Look at so many other things that happened. These people were treated horribly, and this fund could have given them some solace. But it happens to be very popular among many quarters, and I don't participate in that fund. I was certainly treated badly. I don't participate, but I thought it would be very fair for people that spent years in prison, people that were treated so badly, for in many cases people that did absolutely nothing wrong. So I view that fund as a positive, and a lot of Republicans do too, not so many Democrats. And it's not only for that, it's for other things too. People that have been treated unfairly, that have been weaponized by a corrupt government that we had with Obama and that we had with Biden. You had a corrupt government with both of them.
Mr. President, did you sign off on Todd Blanche rescinding?
I didn't look at it. All I know is that Todd Blanche is great. He's going to do a great job. Everybody knows it. And I understand there's been a sign-off. But I don't know what they agreed. I think Todd Blanche agreed to reconfirm things that he's already said. And what he said was okay.
Can I
Please, go ahead.
Avenues that you have, other avenues you have supporters get paid potentially if it's not the anti-weaponization fund? Is there another?
Who are you with?
I'm with MS Now, sir.
You who?
MS Now.
MS Now?
Yes, sir.
What a terrible show that is. They have the worst people on that show.
Are there other avenues that you want to see people?
No, there's no other avenues that I know about. Go ahead.
Mr. President, on the Iran talks.
MS Now. That's the failed MSDNC, right? They failed. They gave it a new name. You know why? Because nobody watched it. Go ahead. And fewer people are watching it now.
On the Iran talks, is there discussions? Is Iran willing to return to a fully free navigation of the Strait? Is that on the table?
Say it again, differently.
Would Iran be willing to return to fully free navigation of the
It has to be. I'm not going to let them charge.
Would you
If anybody's going to charge, we'll charge. We're the one that has total control. We have total control. We have a thing called a blockade with his Navy. And that Navy is, they call it a wall of steel, the United States wall of steel. And no, there's not going to be charging. We're not talking about charging at all. There won't be charging. Yeah, please, in the back.
Mr. President, you said last week that illegal immigration...
Who are you with?
GB News. You said that illegal immigration is killing the UK. Nigel Farage today has proposed the use of the Royal Navy to combat small boats crossing the Channel. Do you think that European nations, including the UK, should be using their militaries to stop illegal immigration?
Look, you have to stop illegal immigration in Europe. I know Europe better than anybody, better than the people that run it, and I have great relationships. Two things are killing Europe. Number one is immigration. Number two is energy. Like the UK, when you look at the UK, they have one of the best energy fields in the world, North Sea oil. Now, I think your new prime minister is going to actually open up from what I hear. I spoke to him, and he sounded terrific on this subject. But you open it up, you'll be a wealthy country. You keep it closed, you're going to be a bankrupt country, which is what you are now. Essentially, you're a bankrupt country. You have one of the greatest energy fields, the North Sea oil, one of the greatest fields in the world. The UK buys its energy from Norway, who gets the energy from the North Sea, from not as vibrant a part of the North Sea oil was. You're sitting on top of gold, better than gold, and you don't do anything with it. It doesn't work. You don't allow the oil companies in, and it doesn't work. And I spoke with your new prime minister. I was very impressed, and he sort of indicated to me, I said, look, you can be a wealthy country or a bankrupt country. You have your choice. Not every country has that choice. Almost no country has that choice. But in the case of the UK, Scotland, I'm talking about Scotland, right off the shore, in Aberdeen, Scotland. Aberdeen was the oil capital of Europe for years. And then one day the Liberals got in and they closed it. And your energy rates have quadrupled. You have among the highest energy prices in the world. You could cut them in half. You could give away free energy if you'd open up the North Sea. And it's good for another 500 years, maybe more, probably 1,000 years.
Has our new Prime Minister restored your faith in the leadership of Britain? Or has our new Prime Minister restored your faith in the leadership of Britain, or do you think it's too late?
Look, I think we're going to have a very good relationship. We'll see. I'm not going to tell him how to run his country. But I can tell you, immigration is an incredible problem for Europe. You're allowing people in that in many cases are not going to help you. I'm going to be nice. They're not going to help you. And the people that are there, people from your country, people from other countries that have been there for a long time and did a great job, beautiful place. Look, I love it. You know, my parents both came from Europe indirectly. So a German, Scot, and, you know, it's like one of those things. It's very sad. When I see what's happening to Europe, it's very sad to me. But they have a problem with immigration. They have a problem with energy. You have windmills all over the place. Windmills, you lose your shirt. Any country with windmills is a loser, okay? You just have to look. If they have windmills, they're a loser. Because you lose money with windmills.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Go ahead, who are you with?
John Fergus Media.
Yeah, that's right.
Original name.
What was your name before?
John Fergus.
Go ahead, John.
We're, Mark. Two domestic questions, sir. The first one is Exxon and Chevron, integrated all U.S., just announced record profits second quarter. Unbelievable. For Exxon, for instance, 14 billion, highest they've had in over a decade. For Chevron for the quarter, highest in history.
By 12 times.
On the back.
You saw that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. On the backs.
I don't like it.
Workers paying higher debts.
Yeah.
They're
making too much money. Okay. Based on a shortage, they're making too much money. I don't like it. And I should be the last one to say, because I'm a big free enterprise guy. Nobody bigger. And, you know, you're going to see oil when we're finished with Iran. You're going to see the prices drop through the floor. But they made too much money. Too much money. Chevron, too much money. ExxonMobil, too much money. When you look at one company where they made 12 times what they made the year before, they're going to give some of that back to the public. And they better cut the retail price, the consumer price. Too much money. You're surprised I'm saying it? I'll say it loud and clear. I'm not happy about it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just one. For those of us here that live in Washington, D.C. with our families, like I do, the renaissance of the city that you've been able to do in 18 months is incredible.
I hope you heard Did you hear that, everybody? The renaissance of Washington, D.C. in 15, 16 months is incredible, and it is. It's clean, it's safe, and you haven't seen anything yet. We're replacing all of the grass that hasn't been replaced in the fields, all the beautiful fields where the grass is. You know, grass is like humans. It has a life. This grass hasn't been changed in 100 years. We're doing all the fields. We're doing most of the graffiti is moved. But the most important thing is it's been beautified. We did 78 monuments and fountains and waterfalls, and they went from being horrible, mostly graffiti said, most of them for 25 years never worked. They haven't worked. And it's a renaissance, like you use the word renaissance, but it's a renaissance. But the biggest thing is we have very little crime now. This was the crime capital, frankly, of the world. It was the most unsafe capital of any country in the world. Now it's one of the safest, and it's one of the safest places in the United States. And people are coming down. You see it, the tourism in Washington, everyone's safe now. Nobody's getting mugged, shot. We used to lose 3 people a week. Death. That's the least, I mean, it's 3 people in terms of death. 150 people a year were killed. They come down from Iowa, they come from Indiana. Mom, I'm looking at the Washington Monument. I'm looking at, and they end up getting killed. You call their parents, I'm sorry. Doesn't happen anymore. We don't have that anymore. We're rough, but we don't have that anymore. Our military has been unbelievable, and they work very well with the D.C. police, but our military came in, the general, people, that we know so well, General, right? They don't play games. And we got the gangs out. We removed almost 5,000 people who were career criminals, who came in with Biden with the open borders, a lot of them. And they're no longer here. We sent them back to their countries. You've got to say, have you ever seen such a transformation?
It's unbelievable if you live here. It's just, you don't want to go back.
And now you can walk to work. You can walk to the White House. The people in the White House, they tell me, sir, thank you. They're thanking me all the time. They used to have to take Uber, and the Uber would be robbed, okay? They weren't even said. They'd go to a restaurant, and they'd feel safe at a restaurant, and then the restaurant would be robbed. Do you know the restaurants were all closing? And now you can't, if you're a restaurateur, you can't get a restaurant. You literally can't. The restaurants are booming. Crime is down 92%, maybe more. I want to get down 100%. You know, the greatest statistic, though, that you have is that 2% of the people create 91% of the crime. You can really handle that. And we've moved almost 5,000 people out. They're criminals, career criminals. We moved that, or in some cases they're in jail. In some cases, they were so bad, they came in through Biden. They're so bad, we don't want to move them out. We want to put them in jails because we're afraid they're going to come back in somehow. So I appreciate you saying that.
Would you consider going to Congress if they come in and try to roll it back, the new Democratic mayor?
When you had a mayor who's, I guess she's a communist. I mean, she says she's a socialist, but I guess she's a communist based on what she says. But I have not met her yet. I look forward to meeting her. Would I federalize? Basically, you're saying federalize D.C. Yeah, well, I'm allowed to do that. Would I do it? If they want to, we took something that was in deep trouble. It was a graffiti-filled, crime-filled mess. We turned it into Shangri-La. We turned it into a great place. Look outside. Look what's happening. Look at the beautiful ballroom and military center. It's a military center, much more than, we have a drone port on top. Look at the grass in front of the White House being all replaced with the top stuff. The parks are all being replaced. It starts very soon, actually. We'll do one at a time. It's about 700 acres of parks. They're all going to have brand new, the best grass you can get. Scots. You know Scots? Scots Miracle-Gro. They're doing it. They do great grass. What can I tell you? I got to give them a plug because they did the White House for free. Sir, a friend of mine, a guy that, he's terrific. We'd like to give you new grass at the White House. I said, I'll take it. How much? He said, free. I'll take it. One of those things. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, this is at least the 5th time you've turned off airstrikes against Iran since April to negotiate. What is your message to the American people who are wondering what has changed this time? Why should it be any different?
Well, you don't know. I don't know. I think we're going to maybe get something, but I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Very tough to do what we have planned, still planned. We'll see what happens. But it's a very, very tough thing to do. I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'll give people a chance. This is a big move. To do an attack that big on a country, I'd rather not do it. Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses, because what happened, cannot have a nuclear weapon, but hopefully they'll come to their senses. So they called me, and they said, please don't attack, we'll make a deal. That's the real truth, and everyone knows it. And who wouldn't call? And they found out through leaks and sleazebags, a lot of sleazebags, leakers. Leakers should be put in jail. They have to strengthen up the laws for leakers. But in this case, leakers helped, because they said the severity of the attack, and Iran knew it. They knew what was coming. It was going to come last night, and it would have gone on for a long time, and there'd be essentially very little left. There'd be nothing left. And if I'm given a chance to let a lot of people live, I want to give that chance. So I'm under no time constraint. I don't happen to be running, but a lot of very good Republicans are running. And you have a sick ideology taking place right now that, hopefully they'll be defeated, because they'll destroy the country if they ever take over. But this desk is like a blocking desk. No matter who gets in, If it's bad, I block, and I'm good at blocking. If it's bad, if it's stupid things like the things they want to do, we want to get rid of the U.S. Senate. I don't like a lot of Senate, just to be honest with you. I don't want to get rid of the Senate. We want to get rid of the Supreme Court. They want to put now 21 or 23 people, that's the real, on the Supreme Court, or get rid of it. They want to get rid of the presidency. They want to have an appointed executive running. That's a communist thing, you know. That's a communist thing. These are sick people. And, you know, I said it the other day, and it maybe doesn't sound that important, but when a country goes bad, like look at the blue cities. What do they have in common, aside from massive crime? Much more crime. The Republicans have very little crime. But what do the blue cities have in mind? And also you can say this with nations when they go bad. The blue cities have something in common: crime, high crime, vicious, violent crime. But what do they have in common? They're all dirty. They're filthy dirty. Their streets are dirty. Their streets smell. Their storefronts are broken. Their trees are all gross. Everything about the place is dirty. And I don't want to mention any specific city. It's really all of them. But you go into these cities that are blue, they're crime-ridden, and they're filthy dirty. They're like Washington, D.C. was a year and a half ago, with graffiti all over the place, with crime all over the place, with people afraid to be here. You had to be ashamed of your capital. Some of the most beautiful buildings built in the real time. Like you look at the Supreme Court building and they put graffiti on it. The most beautiful columns I've ever seen. In fact, our columns are going to be nicer at the ballroom. I said, I want the Supreme Court, but better. But you look at those columns, how magnificent, and then you see graffiti on the side of the building. No artistry, just bad people. But the one thing they all have in common, crime, the two things, crime, but they're disgusting. They're filthy dirty. The streets are dirty. They have people lying all over the street doing you know what. They're all the same. And this is what we're going to put in it. Not going to happen in our country. Go ahead, please. Yeah, in the back.
When someone, me, sir.
Go ahead.
When a group.
Well, let him go. Then you.
I'm sorry.
He was very rude to you, right? Go ahead. Who are you with?
I'm with Real America's Voice, sir. So when a group such as the Haitians lose their temporary protective status, how soon should they be bussed and flown out?
Well, we had a big victory in court on temporary, you know, the protective status. And I largely leave it up to my people. But we've had people here for many years and they were here temporarily. You know, we had people coming in and they've been here for many, many years. And they had a tragedy in their country. They had, sometimes it was storms, or it was, you know, it was hurricanes. And they come in and, you know, they're here for 12 years, 14 years. So something's got to be done. Yeah, please.
Have you spoken to Jeanine Pirro about her decision to drop her?
No, Jeanine Pirro made a mistake. There was vandalism. I just told you we did, I think, 78. One of the things was the reflecting pool. Hasn't worked since 1922 because it always leaked. It always leaked from 1922. You know, it's the largest, longest pool ever and all that. The concept is beautiful, but it always leaked because of the size, because of maintenance, whatever. But it was built in 1922. And from the day it was built, it leaked. Biden spent $58 million. Barack Hussein Obama spent much more than that. He said, I have an idea. Let's take the water from the Potomac. So they took the water from the Potomac, and it was putrid. It was putrid. It was a disaster. Biden was a disaster. I said, I'm going to get that fixed, along with Doug Burgum and Department of Interior. And we worked hard on that. Now, we worked hard on all 70. It's actually, I think, 81 now.
All right, everyone. You are listening, of course, to President Trump live there in the Oval Office, taking questions there from reporters that are in the room. He is there to sign an executive order regarding military families. This is said to be about establishing a military spouse commission. So we'll continue to monitor a lot of headlines coming out of it, or at least a lot of things that are certainly of interest to the Bloomberg audience, including when it comes to the war, the U.S. war with Iran, saying this is a last chance for Iran to sign a deal. You'll find out tomorrow. Or find out today or tomorrow where Iran talks are specifically. But he answered a variety of questions. We have a great voice right in studio with us to kind of get to all things the president and the White House. With us is Bloomberg News White House and Washington correspondent Jeff Mason here in studio. In the meantime, we will monitor, of course, the president's comments and bring you anything of substance. Jeff, good to have you here with us. I do want to be with you. I guess it's, I think, fair. You've been listening to this press conference. Anything of note here that you think we should bring attention to?
A handful of things. Certainly first on Iran. He is suggesting that talks are going on, even though Iran says talks are not going on. And that just becomes a situation of who do you believe? And it's hard to answer that question. But my understanding is there are at least some sort of context going on, but who that is or who it's with seems to be up in the air. It's
do we even know where they are?
Well, I'm not sure that they're physically, that everyone is in one place. There are a couple intermediaries who have been part of this process from the get-go, Oman being one of them, and Iran recognized or acknowledged that Oman was, that they were in touch with Oman about this. But it's just hard. It's hard to know because the president says these things, and it's certainly very important to him to show that there's a pathway to peace because he doesn't want this to go on forever. But it's tricky.
What is that pathway, though?
Yeah.
It's unclear to me.
I wish he were here so that we could ask him. I mean, and to go back to just some of the things that he said just now. He said that the Strait is going to open, the Strait of Hormuz is going to open tomorrow, and that there will be no tolls or no fines. Well, that is the opposite of what Iran is saying, and it's also the opposite lesson, or it ignores the fact that Iran has learned the lesson over the last 6 months that it has the control that it has. So it's pretty hard to imagine that they're just going to give that up. And the president is not acknowledging that at all.
What about, are they going to give up their access to have nuclear weapons?
You know, another piece of that is the president will say, and said over the weekend, and may have suggested it again today, that Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon and we can do this quickly. It took 1.5 years for what was called the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear agreement that was done during the Obama years, to be negotiated. They're nowhere near that kind of an agreement right now. That I can say with full confidence.
And the president did say that would be the second stage, and opening the Strait would be the first phase.
Right, and because that first phase is probably more politically important to him to get that done, because that's the Pandora's box that was opened after the war started. The war started by Israel and the United States. That was not a problem before this war, and is now for the world economy and certainly for the United States.
Yeah, an important reminder, you know, as of February 27th of this year, that the Strait was open.
Yeah.
So
correct.
It would be just going back to what it was before the war.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, certainly the president wants that status quo to be returned, but the Iranians have shown really no willingness to go back to the status quo.
Jeff, there's been a lot of polling that has been done as of late in the last week or so, and people, the Americans, when it comes to the war, they say 31% say the Iran war is not worth it, or worth it, excuse me. 31% say it's worth it. 66% say it's not worth it. This is the Quinnipiac poll. In terms of job approval, 32% approve of the president's job. 58% disapprove of it. Polls are polls. We've seen polls be wrong. I don't know. As someone who covers the White House and the president inside and out, does he look at these things? Does he care about these things?
Yeah, for sure he does. And I think one reason, or one example of how closely he's following it, is he sent out some alternative polls today on his Truth Social account. So he wants people to think A, that they're better than they are, and B, that he's not paying attention to these other public ones. He absolutely is. And I would say also, as a longtime political reporter, that speaking to people in all of these orbits, the Democratic side, the Republican side, regardless of who's in power in the White House, they keep a close eye on these polls because they've translated into votes. And if the approval ratings are high, that would suggest that the midterms are going to go better for his party. The fact that his approval ratings are low is almost certainly going to hurt his party if it doesn't get a turnaround between now and November.
I'm glad you brought up midterms because the president also made some comments about what he calls the Save America Act, which is facing some challenges in Congress right now. If Congress doesn't vote on this before the midterms, is this bill dead?
Probably, because I mean they could start it up again next year, but a bill has to go through the legislative process within the 2-year legislative calendar. So that's going to reset in January if they don't get it done now. And there's very little sign that it's going to get done now. They are trying to bring in some of the aspects of the Save America Act into the budgetary process, but President Trump wants more, and he just doesn't have the votes. Certainly not from Democrats and also not from enough Republicans. And that's been a thorn in his side for weeks now.
Maybe silly question. Is he losing any of his power? Like, it does feel like he still holds so much sway when it comes to what gets done or doesn't get done, Jeff. But I think about, I don't know. Is he losing some of, his ability to really get certain things done?
I don't think that's a silly question. I think that's something we're all watching. And some of the signs of that, or some of the signs of whether maybe his power is eroding, have come from the senators who are willing to stand up to him. Pretty important to note that those are senators who are on their way out. And the president has emphasized that they are lawmakers who he did not endorse, and therefore he thinks that they're upset with him for that, and they're going to have to retire in January. But even so, they have, Cornyn and Tillis, for example, have pushed this issue of the fund as a key negotiating tool over Todd Blanche. And clearly also a thorn in the president's side, because he said just now that he wasn't involved in whatever Todd Blanche agreed.
How about Janine? Can I throw in Janine Pirro, like her, like backing off of that? It seems so.
He just said she made a mistake.
She made a mistake, but she did it.
No.
And I feel like if you'd gone 6-7 months ago, I don't know if that would have happened. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's such a great.
It's minor, but it's
minor, but it's sort of like destroying all of the East Wing without giving permission and then talking about it later. It's a metaphor for how things are going for him right now, and it's certainly got to be fascinating in her office, because there is a difference between saying something that's not true and pushing that story on Truth Social or in the Oval Office or wherever the president and some of his cabinet members are talking about the reflecting pool. There's an entirely different setting when you have to say it in court. And
the president's going to react.
No doubt, and he has.
Yeah.
But she couldn't prove it. And in fact, what she could show is that there were problems with the installation. And that's the opposite of what he wants to hear, but that certainly appears to be the honest truth.
Jeff, one thing that is, I think, of interest to our audience is the president's comments about oil companies.
Yeah.
Just in the last few minutes. He said that oil firms better cut the retail price. He said that Exxon and Chevron are making too much money. Both of those companies actually extended their declines after the president made those comments. ExxonMobil's down about 0.4%, Chevron down about 1.9%. Can you just explain sort of the tension between a traditional, I don't want to say use the word traditional, but like the idea of a free market and the close relationship that historically many Republican presidents have had with oil companies.
Sure.
Indeed, the close relationship that we've seen all those CEOs at the White House, especially in the wake of what happened in Venezuela. But the president now making comments like this and what the repercussions of that could be.
Sure. So a couple of things. Number one, him saying that puts him in almost in Democratic territory, because you could certainly imagine hearing a President Joe Biden or a President Barack Obama going out and criticizing oil companies over prices. So there's a populist aspect to that. I also think it's instructive to remember that President Trump sees the world politically, business-wise, diplomatically through a lens of his own making that's related to him. And right now, it's bad for him politically that gasoline prices are so high. So he would like to see those come down, surely to help Americans, but also to help his political prospects and the political prospects of his party. But it is certainly not in line, as many other things are not, with traditional Republican orthodoxy in terms of business and the relationship with business.
Again, as we like to say, it's a shame nothing's going on when it comes to
Nothing
DC.
going on.
I just want to point out CNN reporting that the president is weighing removing Jeanine Pirro over the reflecting pool. So this just citing some sources on the president thinking about it. So there we go. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We were looking forward to this. So great to have you here.
Back at you.
All right. Talk to you soon. Jeff Mason, Bloomberg News, White House and Washington correspondent, joining us right here in studio. Hey, coming up next, we're going to talk to Torsten Slok. He's been looking at the 60-40 portfolio. He says it's no longer working, so we'll get into his thinking about that.
First up, though, let's get a check of the day's trade and top business stories. Charlie Pellet is standing by in the studio. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Tim and Carol. Indeed, S&P 500 index right now very close to session highs, but look at the Dow. Dow Industrials up 650 points now, 53,134. Potentially could see a record close on the Dow, up now by 1.2%. We've got NASDAQ up 2.1%, the NASDAQ 100 index up 1.7%, the Bloomberg Mag 7 index surging 3.8%, big tech names rallying, the SOX, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Stock Index up 0.8%. All of this with the 2-year 4.25%, the 10-year 4.68%, and the 30-year 5.23%. Gold flat on the day right now, $4,037 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude sell-off in crude. Major story today, WTI down 5%, 80.32 a barrel. Brent 83.74 down 4.8%. Coming up after the close of trading, Palantir. I'm Charlie Pellet. Carol and Tim, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much, Charlie, there with an update on the markets. Let's get right to it. Our next guest out with some research, always a must-read. It's always on the Bloomberg. Everybody talking about it on Wall Street. We talk about it a lot in the newsroom. Torsten Slok is with us, Chief Economist and partner at Apollo Global Management here in studio. Good to have you here with us. So many different places to start, and I do want to talk about the 60-40 portfolio. President Trump, we watch and what he's doing with policies. We talk about AI a lot. We're going to get into that. The Fed. Do you just look at it all, or like first thing in the morning? What do you want? Do you want to check what's going on in Asia? Is it everything that is a priority right now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the agenda is certainly first, Iran is very important. Are ships going to sail through the Strait of Hormuz or not? How much oil is going to get delivered? That continues to be a very important risk, because if we do run dry in tanks, especially in Europe, then we may run out of marine fuel, of jet fuel, of fertilizer, of helium. And obviously this creates a jump risk in prices, especially for energy.
That's still a risk, even though they're like back and forth. And
I know.
It looks like markets look through it.
You're right, Carol, because this hasn't been an issue for a while because we've been so busy with the Fed and with AI. But in the background, this continues, unfortunately, to still be very, very important, because it literally is the case that we could have some tanks get to critical levels. Yes, there's still, of course, fuel running in the pipes and the systems have to function, but we don't know what that critical level of inventory is. And the risk is when we don't have 20% of oil that's supposed to be delivered every day coming through the Strait of Hormuz or Bab el-Mandeb, the consequence is that we still have this in the background as, again, jump risk in oil prices in particular, and also for agricultural prices. So yes, this just adds to the other things about Warsh's press conference and AI and all the other things we can talk about.
But one more on oil and Iran before we get there. It does seem like the oil market, and we just heard from Jeff Mason, who said we have no idea what the talks are happening between the U.S. and Iran right now to end this conflict. Oil prices, though, are down 5%, whether we're talking Brent or WTI. Is the oil market getting this right, or is it getting it wrong?
Well, it is quite remarkable that oil prices have been through this roller coaster of going up and down and seems to have a much stronger opinion about whether a deal is happening or not.
Yeah, it does.
Whereas people in rates and in the economics and in the region, they have a much more nuanced view of, hey, if there is no sign of a deal, and if we have a deal, then there is a bigger risk that we could eventually run dry. So that's why the clock is truly ticking on oil inventories. And the more that ticks, the higher is the risk. Remember, this is now 2 months ago that the head of the EIA said that we were 6 weeks away from Europe running out of jet fuel. Now, we thankfully have not reached that point quite yet, but it's very clear that we literally have 0 ships. If I look at my Bloomberg screen, Hormuz, 0 ships coming through the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb at the moment. That is still a very significant risk in the background. It's difficult to quantify. Who knows if this is tomorrow, next week, or next month. But if the Iranians continue with this until the midterm election, I feel very confident that then we will have the risk that we could see inventory. Remember, Nice Airport ran out of jet fuel 3 weeks ago. So this is also not just some academic exercise. This is something that's really truly happening, not only for jet fuel, also for marine fuel, other types of fuel, and of course also agricultural products such as fertilizer and helium.
Maybe this is why Fed Chair Kevin Warsh was so general, broad, macro. And I want to play something for you because Double Line Capital's Jeff Goodlock called out Michael McKee on X, noting that Mike's question at last week's FOMC press conference. He wrote, the greatest financial media moment year to date was Michael McKee teeing up and then delivering what are you waiting for to Fed Chair Warsh. Listen up, everybody. Here's what Mike had to say at the FOMC press conference last week.
What vetting did you do of the people that you appointed to the task forces? In particular, given Mark Andreessen's substantial political spending, $25 million in just the past year to back candidates who oppose stricter AI regulation, how can the public be confident that a committee he co-chairs will provide an independent assessment of AI's economic effects rather than one aligned with the interests of the AI industry?
Yeah, so I selected 15 incredible subject matter experts to tackle 5 of the most important questions that if we get the answers right, we're going to do a far better job in delivering. And if we get the answers wrong, we have a problem. The comfort that I can give you and your listeners is...
All right, we're going to get out of that. That was actually not the soundbite we wanted to play, but that was Kevin Warsh with Michael McKee. But Mike was basically saying, what are you waiting for? And Torsten, you obviously watched it. He just was so general macro. What did you take away from Kevin Warsh last week?
Well, I think the market reaction speaks to Mike's question, namely, what are we waiting for? Why didn't you just hike rates? The fact that they didn't do that, and the market reaction with a very, very steep curve, of course, said you should have hiked rates. At least now we're beginning to ask questions in markets about, well, do you have the commitment to raise rates? Do you really think inflation will be 2%? And if you think so, what is the road to getting to 2%? Are you going to use the balance sheet? Are you going to use the Fed funds rate? Are you going to use tighter financial conditions?
He should be able to answer, shouldn't he?
He did talk about tighter financial conditions, which may have added a bit to the confusion because it becomes really, really important for the yield curve. Whether you pick to do this through a stronger balance sheet, meaning lower balance sheet, whether you do this through higher rates or whether you do this through tighter financial conditions. Because if you trade rates, you, of course, will have a strong view on how is it that the Fed is going to achieve the 2% goal. And you could say, in theory, that we want to do this through a smaller balance sheet, but we didn't even get an answer to that. So that's why people are now beginning to wonder, okay, there's more volatility in markets, we have a steeper curve, more questions being asked. So therefore, if they don't hike in September, of course, then the market will just ask even more questions about, well, what is now the plan?
Can you do it through fewer meetings a year?
Well, that's one way, of course, of doing it, but that doesn't change the facts that the market.
I'm referring to the New York Times reporting on Friday night that
I saw that.
Yeah, that the Fed could have fewer meetings.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that of course, would change the game quite significantly if they were to go to the legally mandated only 4 meetings a year. But it's very clear still that even that debate, the market will still try to price the Fed at every single moment in time, and that basically means that we have a situation where the market constantly needs to think about how might the Fed interpret the incoming data.
Right, go.
Well, I guess does it mean that we hear more from the Fed speakers and they're sort of jawboning between meetings? I'm just trying to understand a world we live in with less communication if you want the market to serve as sort of the benchmark for the The Fed, I don't know.
I think the toothpaste will come out one way or the other. Meaning other FOMC members will begin to have speeches where they say, here's what I think. Right. And normally some of these FOMC members, they don't get a lot of weight as such from financial markets. But today they are given a lot of weight because if the chair has decided to say, I'm not giving not even forward guidance, but also not framework guidance, then of course others who are willing to talk about not even framework guidance and forward guidance, but just give a description of the data and talk about how do they think the data could be evolving. I think that is going to get a lot more weight, which is why when Beth Hammer put something on LinkedIn on a Sunday afternoon, this suddenly gets people send this to me all Sunday evening and say, what do you think? How should we think about this? And this suddenly becomes really, really important because the market is constantly trying to figure out what is the trajectory of where rates are going.
Right, exactly. I want to get to the 60-40 portfolio that we've talked about forever, right? Being broken. Why so? And you have an AI aspect to this.
Yeah, so the really important aspect of this discussion is the following. The 60-40 portfolio was really truly a stroke of genius when it was invented. Because remember, if my stocks go up, normally my bond prices go down. That means interest rates go down. And that means I make money on stocks and I may lose something on my bonds. Vice versa, when the stock market goes down, then bond prices go up and other yields go down. And that means, of course, that I make money either on bonds or make money on equities. Somewhat randomly, then pick 60-40. This was the weights, and it made sense in an environment where the business cycle goes up and down. Sometimes I should have in stocks, sometimes I should be having a rates. So if that's the case, this was a very good way to balance your portfolio. The problem today is the following. Namely, today stocks are really driven by AI. It's not driven so much by the business cycle, and it's highly concentrated with the 10 biggest stocks making up 40% of the basket. So that means that the AI story has become absolutely critical as a driver of the stock market. And the fiscal situation has become a very important driver of the bond market because now we have significant fiscal problems. We have the fact that rates have been going up, the term premium has been going up, and therefore that's also not necessarily a function of what the business cycle is doing. So suddenly you have two new factors that have been a key driver of equities, namely AI, and a key driver of bond markets, namely fiscal, which are not a function of whether the economy goes up and down. And therefore, we may no longer have the property that you make money on one side and lose on the other, but you may actually lose on both.
We've often said, and we've said that when you see the markets like both stocks and bonds going up in tandem, which is just unusual, right, to see that in any given trade. Having said that, big tech, Torsten, has been disproportionately moving the market even before we started talking a lot about AI. Is there something different? Is AI, though, that trade on steroids and even further disconnecting us from the business cycle?
Yeah, let's think about that exactly at this moment in the 60-40 context, because AI, of course, is highly concentrated in equities, so AI better work out, otherwise equities will not go up. So if at the same time AI companies are also issuing a lot of debt, that takes money out of treasury markets into buy hyperscaler debt. So in that sense, even the bond side of my portfolio is also being impacted, and by the way, is also now AI. So suddenly I have AI everywhere in equities. I also have AI in investment grade credit, and by the way, venture capital, 87% is also AI. So now my whole pie chart is actually all AI. So suddenly there's one factor driving everything I'm doing, and if there's one thing we learned in finance is factor investing, and one factor is driving all returns at the moment, namely AI is in equities, AI is in everywhere in public credit, and AI is also in venture capital. So the best recommendation today is to be not in AI, because that gets you away from this one factor that is driving markets at the moment.
You did say in your note, the real risk emerges if the AI trade reverses or markets become more worried about government deficits. In either scenario, both stocks and bonds would face pressure simultaneously, leaving investors with no hedge, which is what you basically said.
Yep.
What happened with situational awareness, the hedge fund? Is that a sign to you of the AI trade reversing? Like, what's your read on that? And I have no idea if Apollo was interested in the assets. Share what you'd like.
Yeah.
But is that the beginning of a little canary in the coal mine?
Well, what was, of course, very unusual about this is that it didn't take much decline in the AI trade, and suddenly there was a blow up. It was a bit of a coincidence that this was the specific fund you mentioned, but it's very clear that the AI trade reversing. There's a lot of levered ETFs at the moment. There's a lot of people that are having levered bets on AI can only go one way, namely up. And we're now finding out with the underperformings of growth for the last 4 months is very, very substantial. Value has been outperforming.
Yeah.
That's exactly telling you that in a 60-40 framework, growth is just becoming more risky simply because the AI story is beginning to also become more vulnerable, especially with this debate about open source models relative to closed source models. If the Chinese models come and dominate, that will then, of course, take market share from the closed source models. And the question is, how big is that eating into the market share going to be?
The narrative has changed a lot from where we were 3 years ago. Torsten Slok, thank you so much, and thanks for hanging around. We really wanted to talk with you. He's Chief Economist at Apollo Global Management, joining us here in studio.
Hey, we're going to be talking in just a minute all about hospitality and what's happening with hospitality. First, though, a check of the day's trade and top business stories, because Charlie Pellet is standing by with an update. Hey, Charlie.
Hello there. We do have the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. Marriott shares right now, they are tumbling by 6.5% after earnings, but bottom line here, a lot of green on the screen with the S&P at 7605, up 1.5%. Dow Industrials potentially could see a record close here, up 664 points on the Dow. That is a gain of 1.3%. S&P up 1.5%. NASDAQ right now up 2.2%. The NASDAQ 100 index up 1.9%. But look at the Mag 7 index. The Bloomberg Mag 7 index surging now by 4%. 2-year 4.25%. The 10-year 4.68%. The 30-year 5.22%. Stocks are joining bonds higher, cooling tensions in the Middle East, sending crude lower. West Texas Intermediate 80.52 a barrel, down by 4.8%. Carol and Tim, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. Hey, let's get to the hospitality sector, because Marriott International shares, we've seen them under some pressure after the company said that room growth for 2026 would likely come in at the lower end of earlier guidance, driven by construction delays in the
Middle East.
I
mean, we're talking about implications of this war in Iran.
It keeps coming and making its way, right? All right, so we've got that stock down about 6.4%. Hyatt was out, though, last Thursday.
Yeah, stock traded down. The company cut its net income guidance for the full year. The guidance missed the average analyst estimates. The S&P Composite Hotels, Resorts, and Cruise Lines Index, that's up about 3% year to date, so underperforming the broader sector.
All right, so let's get to it. Let's talk about the group. Lizzie Dove is with us, U.S. Gaming, Lodging, and Leisure Research Analyst over at Goldman Sachs, joining us here in studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
We love this area. It tells you, yes, about the consumer, but it also tells you about business travel and so on and so forth. Walk us through, first of all, the earnings that we've gotten and what it's telling us so far.
Well, what's really interesting is there's a bifurcation. We are in one of actually the best travel environments for the US that we've seen in a long time. US RevPAR is up 5%. Now the problem—
Revenue per room.
Revenue per room. That's basically their
the key
indication
metric.
of pricing and occupancy. Now what's the problem, or the offset to that, is two things. One, unit growth is coming in a little bit lighter, so that's new hotel rooms. And two, as you said, the Middle East is an offset there. The pressure there has been higher than expected, and that's impacting not just overall pricing in that area, but also rooms growth and construction.
Does that become at a certain point, if this conflict goes on for so long, like I don't want to say permanent, because nothing is permanent, but something that is the next thing to permanent? Like companies are saying, okay, we're actually abandoning construction projects there.
We're not there yet. I think we're a long way off from that. And the one thing that I think is good and maybe misunderstood by the market is, take Marriott, for example. The Middle East is only about 7% of their pipeline. And that's all of the Middle East. And there's a bifurcation in the Middle East. You see trends in Dubai that have been down 50%, 60% on pricing, but areas like Saudi Arabia that are seeing 30% positive pricing. So there's a bifurcation even in that Middle East. So even if we do see some structural erosion there, there's enough power within it, and there's a small enough segment for the hotel companies.
That's
to
a
still
bigger
do well.
share than I would have thought.
Really?
But I guess so. Is that where the growth is too?
It is where a lot of the growth is. I think
Yeah.
what the point is that we are now kind of in phase 2 of lodging growth. We've had a lot of growth in the US. There's still more to go in the US, but the real next big growth opportunity, it's Asia, it's Middle East, it's Europe, it's LATAM, it's ex-US for the most part.
There's a story on the Bloomberg, Lizzie. The post-pandemic travel boom is starting to lose steam as high fuel prices, the war in Iran, and persistent flying headaches deterred travelers from booking international trips for this year's peak summer season. Now, everybody in the last 2 years was going to Italy or, I feel like, Japan.
Yeah.
Are you seeing this also?
A little bit, but it's at the margin. I think the bigger kind of question or debate that investors are having is, it's almost the travel environment for the US and Europe, to be fair so far, has been so good. The World Cup, for example, that added about 100 basis points to pricing just to US alone. And it's what's so good today makes for a tough comp for tomorrow. And so investors are pre-trading that deceleration now that some of these idiosyncratic tailwinds are now starting to fade, and some of the concerns that you mentioned as well come into the picture.
There were concerns in the last jobs report that we got about hospitality, because there was this idea that the World Cup would actually bring workers into those jobs. Do we see on Friday that actually came true?
Yes and no. And I think what we're seeing in these reports, and not just from the jobs report, but also just generally across kind of consumer dashboards, is again, there's this bifurcation where you have this K-shaped economy where the higher end keeps doing better. That hasn't gone away. I think people thought it would broaden out more this year to, the third and fourth quartiles. We haven't seen it. And that's why you do see people like Marriott on the pricing side doing a little bit better than versus, some of the Wyndhams and Choices of the world.
What are we seeing business versus kind of regular people
they both
traveling?
I think we travel more for business than for regular people.
Actually, that's a really good point.
Yeah, well, there's a blend. The two have become very intermingled, as you mentioned, but both are growing.
No, there's no family coming along. They're pretty quick trips sometimes.
Yeah, both are growing. And that's actually something that's interesting is for the first time, we really have seen quite a nice low single digit plus kind of growth in business travel this year.
Yeah.
So that's broadened out hotel demand a little bit more into that midweek, but leisure's really been the biggest leading indicator.
You also cover the cruise lines.
I do.
Charlie Pellet, big cruise guy.
Yeah.
But those companies getting hit with higher fuel prices too.
Of course.
What it's a good measure of the consumer and a certain type of consumer, depending on which cruise line we're talking about. Broadly, how is that industry doing?
It's interesting. It's been a tough 2026 for sure. I think firstly,
I'm so surprised because you go back to last year and I feel like everybody was
off the charts. They're booking for summer already.
Visibility, bookings way out. What happened?
Yeah, what happened? Couple of things. So firstly, fuel, to your point. There's not much that they can do to offset that. They haven't done surcharges like the airlines have, so that's just a cost that they have to absorb. Secondly, there is a perceived safety impact for US travelers going to Europe on a cruise. They just don't want to be on the water in the Mediterranean, even though it is far from the Middle East. So that's what we've seen here. But it's kind of the opposite of lodging, where you have kind of trough trends or weakening trends this year that now people are thinking could make for a really great 2027 for cruise. We don't have a crystal ball on the Middle East conflict, but to the extent that we see some kind of resolution there long term, it could set up for a really, really strong recovery on cruise, and that's my view.
People who like to cruise, and they go back.
Absolutely.
A second, third, fourth time. Bring the family, bring the grandparents, they just do it. This was fun. Come back?
Yeah, please.
We would love it. Lizzie
Thank
Dove,
you.
she's U.S. Gaming, Lodging, and Leisure Research Analyst over at Goldman Sachs. That's going to do it for this first hour of Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. Tim and I continuing on radio. The close coming your way on TV.